Okay, this is number 35 on 7.8. It says you're building a birdhouse in the shape of a rectangular prism and it has a volume of 128 cubic inches. The dimensions of the birdhouse are 4 by W and W plus 4. So part A, you want to write a polynomial that represents the volume of the birdhouse. And in order to calculate the volume of a rectangular prism, it's the length times a width times a height. So the polynomial should be the length 4 multiplied by the width W and multiplied by the height W plus 4. And then in order to enter this in, you just need to multiply everything out. So 4 times W is 4W. And then you would need to multiply 4W by W plus 4. So you distribute the 4W to the W and the 4. 4W times W is 4W squared. Just want to add the exponents of the like variables. And then 4W times a positive 4 is a positive 16W. So that should be the volume of the birdhouse in terms of a polynomial, or the answer for part A. And then for part B, you want to find the dimensions of the birdhouse. You already know one of the dimensions is 4. If you calculate W, then the width would be W, and then the height would be W plus 4. So in order to calculate each of those dimensions, you know that the volume is 4W squared plus 16W that we found on part A, but it also tells you that the volume of this birdhouse is 128 cubic inches. So this polynomial represents a volume, 4W squared plus 16W, and then the volume is 128 cubic inches, so all of this would be equal to 128. And then we could use this polynomial equation to solve for W. You first have to get everything to one side, so you could subtract 128 from each side of the polynomial equation. And then on the left side, the negative 128 is an unlike term with all of this, so I'm going to write it over here because I have more room. It's 4W squared plus 16W minus 128 is equal to 0. And so now in order to solve this for W, I want to factor the polynomial. So the first thing that you want to take a look at is if there's a greatest common factor. If you just look at the numbers 4, 16, and negative 128, there is a greatest common factor. The greatest common factor is 4. If you factor out a 4 from the first term, what you're left with is W squared. If you factor out a 4 from the second term, you'd be left with 4W. And if you factor out 4 from the last term, you'd be left with negative 32. All that's still equal to 0. So even though we factored out the 4, which is the greatest common factor, doesn't mean that we're done factoring. You could still factor the W squared plus 4W minus 32. In this case, A is 1. That's a coefficient of W squared. B is 4, and C is negative 32. So if you use the diamond method, C is what goes on top, negative 32. And then what goes on the bottom is the positive 4. So you look for two numbers that multiply to negative 32. That means one of them has to be positive and one's negative, and then add to 4. So the combination that works is positive 8 times negative 4. So then for this polynomial, it factors into, you still have the 4, W plus 8 times W minus 4. And then all that's still equal to 0. So now in order to solve for W, you use a zero product property. You know 4 is not equal to 0, so you can kind of ignore this right now. If you set W plus 8 equal to 0 and solve that equation, you get W equals negative 8 by subtracting 8 from each side. If you set W minus 4 equal to 0 and add 4 to each side, you get W is equal to 4. If you go back to this diagram right here, W would be the width of the birdhouse. The width can't be a negative number, negative 8, so the width is 4. Okay. So in order to fill in each of the boxes here, the length that was given, that's 4 inches. The width, that's W, that's also 4 inches. Oops. And then in order to find the height, W plus 4, if W is 4, 4 plus 4, That's 8 inches. So solution parts A and B.